the history of Korean rock from 1963 to 1980. This episode, Korean rock from the 1960s. Hello and welcome to the first episode in this mini podcast series about the history of Korean rock from the 1960s and to the 1970s. I'm your host John, and I'm joined by my friend Faramount, who I'll be introducing the joy of Korean music to throughout the series. I actually tried to do this podcast myself years back, but it didn't last very long, so fingers crossed for round 2.
Hi. What do you want me to say? I don't know. I'm up for being the co-host, I guess. Or well, it's not really an interview. It's more like an expository thing.
Yeah.
Well, I'm being exposed to all of this stuff. I already know a lot of this stuff. I've read a bit of his blog. He's already told me about a lot of this stuff. But we'll see what's new.
But you're not as mental about this as I am, so it's gonna be sort of, you're the normal person here. Rock music in South Korea started in the early 1960s with performance at the U.S. Army bases. U.S. Army bases did have performances before the 60s, but they were more geared towards big band performances and jazz. I know you like big band stuff.
Yeah,
one
jazz.
I
like everything.
You like a bit of jazz. One of the earliest examples of Korean rock comes from the godfather of Korean rock. You might be familiar with him, called Shin Jung-hyun, and his first album. The album Hikishin Guitar Melody follows the naming scheme of many other instrumental guitar albums from the early 60s, but the music couldn't be more different. Here's a snippet of one of the songs, a cover of Oh My Darling Clementine. So yeah, a lot of cool guitar parts there, a bit of saxophone in there.
Yeah, completely understated lead guitar.
Yeah.
I mean, I presume they didn't have expensive amps back then, as they were playing like army bases. Maybe they only had like, I don't know, maybe they could only do the distortion for one of the guitars and not for the other ones. Maybe not for the lead. They just decided for the rhythm guitars.
In
So I'm not
fact,
sure if they are distorted, are they?
in fact, this whole album was recorded off a borrowed reel-to-reel tape recorder,
Mm-hmm.
and that's the whole album. That's crazy that it was just recorded off a reel-to-reel machine, and that's pressed on record. The album's full of old children's songs that were sung in Korea at the time, and the whole album, although it's kind of rock, you can also hear a bit of like jazz influences with like the upright bass or the saxophone.
No trot or anything like that?
No trot.
Because trot was the main, yeah.
We'll get more into the genre of trot in a little bit, but trot was the dominant genre of the time, and Shin Jung-hyun never really did much trot. He was more very much influenced by just traditional Korean music or even just Western rock.
Mm-hmm.
The album is actually a bit of a mystery because no one truly knows when it came out. Shin claimed that it was recorded in 58, but he covers the song What I'd Say, which was released in 59, and the 12-inch record wasn't a thing in Korea until 1963. And looking at the catalog number, it was probably released in 1963. So who knows when it came out? No one's telling the correct story. But yeah.
Mm-hmm. I mean, there was another album that we just don't know about that he made around
Maybe.
that time.
Yeah, that's an interesting take. Who knows? New stuff is getting discovered all the time in the community, so maybe. But this is sort of like jazz slash rock kind of big band style music. But the first undisputed Korean rock album was released by a 5-piece Beatles style band called the Key Boys in July of 1964, barely after the Beatles got popular in America. Most of the album comprises of pop song covers, along with the first known Korean cover of I Wanna Hold Your Hand, and even some originals written by outside songwriters. Keyboys were often
Okay.
called the Korean Beatles, not only due to them covering and imitating the Beatles, but also due to their insane popularity. And even after all the members left the group, all the members went on to become famous in their own right. Here's a snippet
Yeah.
of one of the original songs, the title track, Her Lips Are Sweet. Yeah, with that sort of falsetto voice is kind of comical, and then it just kicks into that short but like powerful solo, and I love that. That's
I
just
mean,
like
it's a
them.
fail.
It's very garage, like the solo at least.
I feel like it's more surf rock than anything. You can see with the not the bass line, the rhythm line,
It could be,
rhythm
yeah.
guitar line.
Uh,
I mean, you can see that like the first round of like goes out as more Bill Haley with the tenor sax. Is it a tenor sax or an alto sax? I not get with that stuff.
I don't know if it's like the tape's being damaged, but like when the like solo kicks in with the drum fills, it almost sounds like it's like looping backwards, and I really like that.
Yeah, that's fun.
The group apparently had a hard time explaining the music they do to outside songwriters who wrote songs for them because rock band music was still quite new in Korea. So a lot of the songs on this albums that aren't covers are more sort of trot like more like not rock based basically.
I mean, I don't know that much about like trad and Korean music. Was it inspired by like the?
Yeah, Japanese
Was it
enka
inspired by
music.
like Campanelli? Yeah,
Ja-
enka music. Oh,
Japanese enka music, yeah.
yeah.
And
I was thinking that it was more in the like style of the old songwriters of the
it's I was
like
gonna get to this later in the podcast, but since we brought this up, it's sort of like the equivalent to like oldies or even like uh standards in the West, but it's still very much popular
so
to this day.
traditional pop, I
Yeah,
guess.
traditional pop, I guess. Yeah, but it's still very popular to this day,
Hmm.
mostly for old people. Uh, quite funny. I heard a story of the early version of the Keyboys. They had the bassist play an upright bass because there were no electric basses at the time in Korea. And the drummer played like a cut up banjo as the snare drum, and the cymbals were being held up by like construction steel beams.
That's I mean that's very 60s in the early 60s when like most
It's very like
not studio rock
DIY.
bands.
Yeah.
Yeah, when like when the big studios in at least like the UK were pumping out like I don't know Tommy Steele, people were making their own like people were making do. People were
Yep.
using again upright basses instead of electric basses, which I mean, if you look at like Elvis, for example, Bill
Yeah,
Black used
Elvis, Buddy
electric
Holly,
bass.
they all have like
Yeah.
upright bass players. Before the Keyboys album that we just talked about was discovered, it was widely believed that the first ever Korean rock album was by Shin Jin-hyun's band, The Ad 4. Released on December of 1964, the first Ad 4 album, unlike the Keyboys album we previously talked about, is entirely made up of original compositions written by Shin. Apparently, the album would have been released a little bit earlier if it wasn't for the band lineup being a bit unstable, and the whole album was recorded supposedly in one take with a single vocal microphone.
With a single vocal microphone. I mean, that's how they used to do things. I presume that would have made for like, I mean, even in the master tapes, so like a very washed out sound.
Yeah,
for the rest of the orchestra.
you
I
could
mean, not orchestra,
a
for
lot
the
of
rest of the band.
the recordings you could. It's a bit hard to hear the bass and stuff. I think it's just the way it was recorded at the time. Uh,
Mhm.
if the Keyboys portrayed the white rock and roll sound similar to the bands like the Beatles, the Ad 4 played more of the music influenced by black music, sort of soulful mixed with rock. Anyway,
R&B.
R&B. Yep, there you go. Uh, here's a clip of the title track, Woman in the Rain by the Ad 4.
잊지 못할 빗속의 여인 지금은 어디에 있나 노란 레인코트에 검은 눈동자 잊지 못하네 다정하게 미소 지며 검은 우산을 받쳐주네 나린 빗방울 바라보며 말없이 걸어.
One of the more gloomier songs off the album, although it's quite popular nowadays, it was just not. It just went under the radar at the time.
It's been re-recorded a ton of times. I mean, most of the re-recordings don't sound anything like the original.
Yeah, in fact, there's a ton of tracks on the original Ad 4 album that Shin later gave to other artists or gave to different people because he had a sort of mentality that if it didn't become a hit, keep on like re-recording it until it does, and a lot of times it did work.
Were they rock covers, rock reinterpretations
Mostly, yeah.
that the artist said? Right.
There's actually a really funny one. There's one of the tracks here. It's very rock and roll number. It's very similar to like Roll Over Beethoven, kind of like those Chuck Berry numbers. And in the 70s, Shin Jin turns that into like a prog rock song that's like 8 minutes long, I think. Doesn't really work, but it's interesting to hear what he does.
I thought it was more of a jam thing when like I listened to it. It was definitely more in line with let's say Get Ready by who made Get Ready? Rare Earth?
Rare Earth,
I
yeah.
think.
Yeah, Rare Earth. But anyways, you could hear the influence of sort of the mix of Western beat rock with the more popular Korean style songwriting. It's a unique sound, and I think this also means that the Ad 4 used strings on their album before the Beatles.
I mean, they wouldn't be the first. I mean, Buddy Holly was doing that way back in the
True, but like
50s.
Beatles wise, you know.
Mhm.
Despite all this revolutionary feat of 14-track album being all originals and one of the first Korean rock albums, this album was widely ignored by the public, with it being considered a failure in Shin Jin-hyun's eyes. It wasn't like the band wasn't popular. Apparently, the band had consistently sold out shows, but their records just didn't sell well.
I mean, look at the cover. They were playing on TV.
Yeah, they were playing on TV. If you look at the cover of the first Ad 4 album, you could see they were playing on television shows a lot of the times. My obsession with Korean rock started when I discovered this album cover, and I was so fascinated by how much they looked like the Beatles. And I was like, I didn't know my country had like a history of rock like this, and that was what sort of got me into Korean rock. Hopping back to the Korean Beatles, the Keyboys, they released their second album around 1965-66, although dates are unclear. The record was released as a split album between the Keyboys and the singer Johnny Lee, where the Keyboys play on one side and Johnny Lee sings on the other. These kinds of split albums and various artist releases were common in Korea at the time, mostly because it was difficult to fill out a full album's worth of material, and the concept of like the 7-inch singles or the EPs didn't exist at the time. It was actually kind of interesting to see why the 7-inch single was never popular in Korea for some reason, because we had singles through the 78 records, the 78 shellac records, and then it just sort of disappeared for a while. And then we had maxi singles in the 80s. Sometimes we had like 7-inch singles, promo stuff in the 70s, but like we never really had a 7-inch like culture, and that's kind of weird. Here's a snippet of one of the more exciting songs on the album, their cover of Jambalaya on the Bayou, or Bayou rather.
내 마음은 그대 곁이 좋은데요. 예, 그대는 떠나려고 손 흔드네. 내 가던 님 돌아오면 누가 말려. 하, 서산에 걸린 태양이 붉게 타요. 아, 가는 님을 막지 못해 슬퍼져요. 옷자락을 잡을까요? 통사 좀 해볼까요? 아, 가던 님 돌아오면 누가 말려. 서산에 걸린 태양.
That's the drummer singing, and can you believe that drummer is now like a church priest?
So it's a little richer.
Oh, that's true. You could really hear that the Keyboys excel at rock and roll cover songs, and you could hear their energy on the tracks, getting better and better as they improve. We'll never know what their live performances were like, since there are no known recordings that survive, but these songs give us a good snippet of what it could have been. One thing to note, that a lot of these early bands, their live setlist songs and the songs they put on their records would have been very different, since the song selection on their albums would have been more up to the record label to choose than the band. So it's impossible to gauge from these albums what they were like on stage. We keep flopping back and forth here, but that's just how the story goes. After the commercial failure of their first album, it was almost like Shin Jin-hyun lacked any self-confidence anymore to release any more of his original material, instead dedicating his recording career to record covers and instrumental surf rock music. The first album is very singular in their discography, because nothing came after it that was quite historically significant as that release. Case in point, the band backed an Elvis Presley-like singer, Kim Young-guk, on a record to cover rock and roll numbers. Here's a snippet of their cover of Too Much.
나는 당신을 믿고 열렬히 사랑을 했어. 당신도 나를 믿고 영원히 사랑을 해주. 진정으로 사랑하는 그대에게 모든 것을 바치리다. 마음껏 사랑해줘요. 내 곁에 있어.
What's up with the percussion instrument playing in the background?
It could be just a drum. You mean percussion, right?
Could it? Yeah,
It's like
I
a
don't know.
rim shot, right? It's like a rim shot of the
Is it a
drum.
rim shot?
I'm not
Right.
I'm not too good at drums, so I'm not too sure. And the whole
Okay.
second side of that record is just Elvis covers. I mean, it does have What I'd Say, which is a Ray Charles number, but apart from that, it's all Elvis covers. It's a decent cover, but it's far removed from the great originals they showed off on their first record. I won't go into detail here, but there are also 2 more Ad4 albums that are both instrumental surf rock music. Shin Jin-hyun does do something unique with the format by taking Korean oldies and standards and turning them into surf rock songs. But again, if this was any other band, I would be like, that's interesting. But with Shin Jin-hyun, I know such greatness is behind those guitar skills that it just passes me by, honestly. Like, you would be quite disappointed if the Beatles released Please Please Me and that failed, so Paul McCartney just went on to like make a million surf rock albums. That'd be kind of disappointing, wouldn't it?
I mean, you say that, but I don't know, depends.
Yeah,
Maybe he makes
it's
them
like
really
the
good.
the covers are
Makes
good.
some
The
really good
covers are
fan art.
fun and exciting, but like the originals are in there in his brain somewhere,
Mhm.
and it's just not getting let out. Entering 1966 now, this was the start of the psychedelic rock. I guess there's some debate on when it started, but this is the sort of general period with albums such as Revolver and Pet Sounds. However, in Korea, this was the beginning of the rock and roll craze. It's a bit delayed, and more artists released quite exciting records. One of which was by a 6-year-old singer by the name of Park Hwa-lan, who released her second album in 1966 with a little help from a guitarist called Lee In-sung. Here's a snippet of her cover of Monkey Monkey.
Hey monkey 댄스를 추면은
Hey monkey monkey
Hey monkey 곁에서 우스워도
Hey monkey monkey
Hey 춤을 추어 보면 황홀해
Hey monkey monkey
Hey 모두 다 같이
Hey monkey monkey
즐거운 몽키 흥겨운 몽키 몽키 춤을 춥시다
Poor guys in the back. Imagine being upstaged by a 6-year-old.
Yeah. I mean, if you think like a child singer, especially in the 60s, you expect them to sing like children's songs, right? But like Park Hwa-lan on this record shows off like she can really sing rock and roll, and it's quite exciting. I think I really like this record. It's quite fun. The record has tracks like the previously mentioned Monkey Monkey, Kansas City, What I'd Say, and in between those tracks you can hear guitarist Lee In-sung play along to great instrumental tracks. One of which that surprised me was a track Summertime. The Zombies covered it in the 60s as well. The Ad 4 also
The
covered Summertime.
The Gershwin song from
Yeah.
Porgy and Bess.
Exactly.
It's summertime.
I don't know if
yeah.
it was influenced by the Zombies or it was just a popular
I
thing
know
to
the
cover at the
Thunder.
time. Yeah, but seeing two examples here where rock and roll people covering Summertime in Korea, I think it's nice. There are actually quite a few tracks that tend to appear over and over again on these 60s rock and roll records in Korea, like Unchain My Heart and What I'd Say, which is quite interesting.
I mean, you have to understand that. I mean, this was more of a Dylan thing, but they are from an era where most albums simply contained covers. That they were still transitioning from the old style of like songwriters, established
Yeah, songwriters being
writing
separate
for,
to
writing from
singers.
performers.
Yeah,
Yes.
but it was like
So
merging into one,
there were
that profession.
yeah, so there were quite a few rock and roll, or more like R&B standards. I mean, Leiber and Stoller probably produced the most of them for the Coasters, for Elvis.
Yep. Ian Sung, the guitarist who plays on this record that we just talked about, also put out an album of instrumental covers at the time. Much like the Shin Jin-hyun instrumental album that was the first album we talked about, he also covers a lot of Korean classics and children's songs, but in a different style to Shin's, giving the listener a more unique experience. Check out how he arranged this children's Korean song, Blue Sky Milky Way. Excuse the background static. My record is a very poor copy of this album. But yeah, it's
Yeah.
hard to arrange a children's music, like traditional children's music, in a fun style like that. I think that's quite impressive, actually. Although you might not be familiar with the original, I think it's still, you hear children's
Mhm.
music and it's like, no way he could uh, arrange it like that, and he does it.
I was going to speak a bit about space age pop and just instrumental music from that time. Like first instrumental music that kind of mixed rock and roll
Hmm.
into all of it. But I think this falls a bit out of that tradition. I feel like this is mostly just, again, this kind of rock and rollized.
Yeah.
Could say that.
I was so used to these like cool, rare instrumental rock albums from the 60s, like Korean music scene, that there was a period when I just bought any 60s looking instrumental guitar record expecting it to be like this great thing, and it was just like mostly boring music.
I mean, boring is in the ear of the beholder.
Boring as in my taste of music. Unfortunately, the story of Yin Sung and the 6-year-old singer Park Hwa-lan ends here, as they both stopped making music after those albums. Although Yin Sung was a guitar teacher and his books on playing guitar were quite popular among guitarists, Yin Sung gave up on music quite early on, as he believed that he wasn't going to get popular or be able to earn a living from his music and songwriting. As for Park Hwa-lan, her trail ends cold here. Not a lot of information on her is available, and we don't even know where she is today. So that's usually the fate of a lot of these 60s and 70s Korean artists. You don't know where they ended up generally.
Yeah, or they go hide in the woods.
Yeah. they go hide in the woods. Anyways, on a more brighter note, remember the split album between the Key Boys and Johnny Lee that I talked about a bit back? Well,
Yeah.
the singer on the flip side, Johnny Lee, also released 2 solo albums around the year 1966. One was quite popular, although it was disappointing for me, as it was more of the trot music than the rock and roll sound he was known for on stage. Trot music, as I talked about, takes inspiration from the Japanese enka music, and is basically equivalent to standards in the West. But we all talked about this a few minutes ago. The other album
Yep.
from this year was the soundtrack to the film Youth College, and that record has quite a few rock and roll numbers that I really like. As I previously said, there are a lot of Korean covers of the song Unchain My Heart, but this has to be my favorite. The tempo is fast, and overall, it's just very exciting sounding. And you'll hear that word exciting a lot today. But this truly is fun. Have a listen.
Unchain my heart, 나는 괴로워. Unchain my heart, 정말로 미치겠어. 당신은 나를 묻다하지 마. 이 말은 오직 당신뿐인데. So unchain my heart, baby, 돌아와요. Unchain my heart, 울고 싶어요.
I was used to sort of the relatively slower tempo covers of Unchained My Heart. So when I heard that, I was sort of blown away because how fast and fun it sound. And the whole album's full of fun covers like that. I really like it. Unfortunately, the movie this album is a soundtrack to is unavailable to watch. Whether that's because it's been badly damaged or lost, or because it just hasn't been released by whoever owns it, I don't know. But if the soundtrack is this good, the movie surely is exciting as well. Apparently the movie's about this band who's like supposed to be like pretending to be the Beatles, trying to win like a song contest. I'm not quite sure, but it does look quite exciting, and I want to see it get recovered at least.
Let's cross our fingers and hope.
Let's cross our fingers and hope. Rivalry among musicians is a common thing all over the world. Yeah, Oasis and Blur, the Beatles and the Stones, or the Beach Boys even. So it's no surprise that Korea has quite a few. One of these rivalries is between this previously talked about singer Johnny Lee and another singer called Chung Won. Although Johnny Lee gained fame through the Trot album we talked about, Chung Won really never really gained recognition. It's a real shame that a lot of these solo artists eventually pivot to trot music so they could earn a living, because they were rock stars at heart, especially during live shows. And it's unfortunate that that kind of music just wasn't very commercial at the time, and it just never was in Korea. Rock music was never commercial in Korea.
I mean, it kind of is nowadays, isn't it?
It's more sort of underground, you know. You compare it to other genres like K-pop and trot, like right now,
Mhm.
and it's
Yeah.
nothing compared to those. It's
I mean,
popular.
right now, since the 2000s,
Yeah,
because I
2000s.
do know about some 2000s Korean rock.
Yeah, it is. It is quite. It does have a very uh, lively underground scene, but it's hard for those bands to really get anywhere. One of Jungwon's albums that is most well known to Korean collectors is an album he did with the band called The Shouters. You see, in the 1960s, it wasn't common for these bands to release albums by themselves. A lot of bands existed that we only have photos of because they simply thought making an album by themselves was this outlandish concept, and bands were only supposed to perform live and back other singers in the studio.
Mhm.
So even though we don't have any recordings by the band The Shouters by themselves, we do have this record where they back Jungwon. Here's a snippet of their cover of Hound Dog.
그건 안 되네 안 되지라이 연애에 솜씨 있는 멋쟁이 사나이 오케이 됐어 one more time 맹꽁이 가지고는 안돼 사람 웃기네 사람 웃기네 아무리 토끼 사냥이라지만
Yeah, there I've highlighted more of the musical performance than the vocals, and you can really tell these are talented and well-practiced musicians.
That the original have the call and response, and the verses as did his version, their version.
I don't think Elvis's Hound Dog has a call and response. It's just mostly him, right?
I think so as well.
Yeah, it's they transform the song into their own thing, which is nice. A lot of these bands, since they were performing in front of American soldiers in the U.S. Army bases, their standards had to be really high. Sometimes performances had to be as thrilling as the Western bands, since they were actually performing to actual Americans. So a lot of these bands that released albums during the 60s and the early 70s were no amateurs. They were very skilled, and that's something you have to understand. It's not like Western music scenes where there's a lot of amateur garage rock bands that popped up in the 60s. It's these are all sort of very talented people. Now, circling back, do you remember Shin Jung-hyun? We're going back to Shin Jung-hyun, the godfather of Korean rock. Going through his history through these records really shows you how crestfallen Shin Jung-hyun was at the time. He rarely released any original songs and stuck to surf rock covers. Even after the breakup of the Ad4 and the forming of his new group, Blues Tet, aka The Actions, they were known by separate names, his music rarely changed. The only record released by The Actions is another instrumental surf rock album, very similar to those released by his previous band. Here's one of the few original tracks from his albums, the self-titled track, The Actions. Yeah, very much your average surf rock track. It's good, but no way was it impactful to Korean music as a whole.
Yeah,
What do you think of surf rock, Pharaoh?
I like it. I remember listening to Bambara. I was mostly into the studio effects in those tracks. Plus, I'm not sure if most of the tracks there were originals. I'm pretty sure they were damn good originals.
There's a period when I was like really into surf rock last year, and I listened to a lot of Dick Dale. He's kind of cool. Surfaris,
Yeah.
The Ventures. In fact, the ad four were called the Korean Ventures, which this album, although it faded into obscurity like many of his other albums at the time, the success he was looking for was just around the corner, and we'll get to that very shortly. But let's switch things around and get back to the story of the Korean Beatles, the Keyboys. After the few years of getting used to performing in the studio, the Keyboys released a new record in 1966 entitled Hit Album. Now, a lot of 60s and 70s Korean albums called like Hit Album or the greatest hits or the best of, a lot of the times they aren't repackaged old songs. They are newly recorded songs or newly re-recorded songs. So it is very important that you collect those as well. This record is completely made of cover songs of Western rock songs and pop songs. And there are even 5 Beatles covers on this album.
Being?
Oh, can I name them off the top of my head? Let's see. Ticket to Ride. Ticket to Ride. I Want to Hold Your Hand. And I Love Her. All My Loving. And A Hard Day's Night. Not in that order. But, yeah.
This album was released in '66.
Yep, 66. Songs like I Want to Hold Your Hand and Wooly Bully have been re-recorded, and you can really tell that they've improved as a musical act and a group over these short few years. Here's actually a comparison between their original cover of Wooly Bully, and then I'll play the newly recorded cover of Wooly Bully that's on the Hit album.
지난 밤 사랑 또다시 만나면 볼래 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 그러지 써다닌 간에 앞마을 뒷마을로 해녀나 만나볼까 그 총각 만날까 볼래 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 watch it now watch it go
I don't know. To me, it sounds more like it was recorded better produced, and overall sounds more energetic. Now, was that more dynamic? Now, was that because they added that screaming sound? Who knows?
I think it's because of the miking.
The
I
miking.
think the miking on the first one, yes, wasn't it recorded with one mic, you said? No, that was Keyboy.
That was the ad for. Yeah, this is the Keyboys. You
Oh,
get
that was the ad
confused
for.
now.
Oh, yeah.
It's only
Yeah.
fair. This is quite confusing. But yeah, it's still very primitive microphones on the first recording, and this one sounds very good. Also helped by the fact that the second recording we have the master tapes to it. This would unfortunately be the last album by this version of the Keyboys. What I mean by that is in 1967, most of the members have left the band to either pursue solo careers or join other groups. The only member left was rhythm guitarist slash keyboardist called Ok Bin. Eventually, new members would fill the spot of those who left until by 1970, none of the original members still remained in the group. In the Korean record collecting world, we divide up the Keyboys' career in two. Their first albums up to the previously mentioned hit album when they were the Korean Beatles, and their albums from 69 to when they eventually broke up, when they were more of a psychedelic rock group. So this signifies the end of the Beatles, Korean Beatles Keyboys, and also the sort of end of Beatle-like beat groups in South Korea. But there's still one more band I have yet to mention. Around 66 or 67, a group called Five Fingers started releasing records. You could tell by their photo on their cover, there's very much still a 60s invasion type band, even in the late 60s. But don't let looks deceive you, as this album has some surprising covers. The traditional song, Sloop John B., most famously arranged by the Beach Boys on their Pet Sounds album, is present on this album. Here's a clip. What'd you think of that?
First off, was the Reverend syncopated in the original?
Ooh, that's a good question. I haven't heard Pet Sounds in a while, actually.
I mean, the second question, I don't think the song quite works with just throwing guitar to guitar. The drum. It still sounds like, I don't know. It sounds like it's not a woodblock. It sounds like castanets, but like I know it's not castanets. They're not like cutting group,
Yeah.
whatever that is. And of course the bass.
It always seemed a bit weird to me where on the album cover they're in mop top haircuts and in suits on the front cover. They're singing songs like Wooly Bully and Kansas City. They sneak that number in. They sneak Sloop John B in. Not complaining, I think it actually distinguishes this band from many of the others from this era, but it's still interesting.
Mm-hmm.
And since not a lot is known about this band, heck, we don't even know all the band members' names. Just for fun, I prepared another track for us to listen to. This is another psychedelic type cover on the record, that being the Rolling Stones' Painted Black.
새카만 우산 쓰고 걸어가는 연인 연인은 언제나 검은빛을 좋아해 언제나 다정했던 연인의 모습 언제나 검은 것을 입고 다니네 나에게 검은 것은 사랑의 표적
I especially like that part in the chorus when the drum roll gets louder, very dynamic sounding, and then boom, cymbal hit. I love that. I mean, it's in the original too, but you know.
What's the Oompa Pa rhythm? The Oompa
Oompa, oompa, oompa.
Yeah.
Is that not in the original?
No.
Oh, well, I guess it makes it unique. But yeah, it's a bit weird. It's sort of like if I keep comparing this to the Beatles, but what else can I compare it to? It's like the Beatles if they had like mop tops in the front cover of their albums and like 63 suits, 1963, and they were singing like Revolver songs. I think I thought it was a pretty faithful recreation of the cover. I actually haven't heard this album in a while until I started preparing for this podcast. I thought the cover would sound pretty weak compared to the original, as is with many Korean covers. But I thought this was pretty solid. Good rhythm, powerful guitar sounds and drum sounds, great vocals.
Hmm.
Five Fingers, along with the Ad 4 and the Keyboys, were the only 60s invasion type groups from Korea that consistently made albums. How they broke out of the mold of Korean bands not being able to make records by themselves, I'm not sure, but I'm glad that they did. They released a couple of albums backing other singers, all released with the title Top Song. I guess they were quite popular because they eventually got a second album and even a compilation album combining some of the tracks from those two releases. The second album cover sees them ditch the Beatles suits for more casual looking outfits, at least on the cover. But their album still consists of many of the similar sounding songs like La Bamba, Twist and Shout, and Guitar Boogie. Sometime around the late 1960s, Shin Jin-hyun and his then band, the Donkeys, this was his new band called the Donkeys, teamed up with the singer called Lee Jung-hwa to make two records. The latter was mostly comprised of re-recordings of the former. However, they're both quite good in their own little ways. Here's a snippet of the song Flower Petal. But no, this will be pretty different from the beat groups and the rock and roll numbers you've heard up to this point.
꽃잎이 피고 또 질 때면 그날이 또다시 생각나 못 견디겠네. 서로가 말도 하지 않고 나는 돌아져서 그대로 와버렸네. 그대 왜 날 잡지 않고 그대로 왜 가버렸나. 꽃잎 보면 생각하네. 왜 그렇게 헤어졌나.
So now we're really getting into the psychedelic era of Korean rock music.
Hmm. I mean, that had a kind of Mancini touch to it.
Mm-hmm.
A kind of like this Wine and Roses kind of touch. Is that the name of the song? No. Let's move on.
Although these albums by Lee Jung-hwa weren't very commercially successful at the time, it showed a clear direction in Shin's music heading forward. Psychedelia. You could also tell by the fact that these two albums were both entirely composed of Shin Jin-hyun originals that he was starting to gain confidence in his songwriting again, starting to build up his skills again after the failure of the first Ad 4 album.
Hmm.
Although the Donkeys would gain popularity, the Shin Jin-hyun group, by backing other singers that would eventually become famous with songs Shin wrote, Lee Jung-hwa, like many others we covered today, faded into obscurity, and her whereabouts are known after she left to perform in Vietnam. Makes you kind of feel weird that these albums that are going for hundreds or even thousands of dollars on auctions, and we just don't know where the singer is. We just don't know where they are or what they're doing. We don't even know if they're dead or alive, you know.
I mean, that adds it to the kind of I don't want to say mystique because there really isn't a mystique. It adds it.
I can kind of understand that sort of mystique thing you're talking about. I can see it. It makes it more interesting.
I'm thinking more about the unavailability of it.
Yeah,
We
the
don't even know
rarity
where
of
the
it.
person made it is.
Around this time, Shin was helping a sister duo with music lessons. Shin was actually planning to go to Vietnam to perform since it seemed like there wasn't really a market for his kind of music in Korea. And the sisters wanted to make a record commemorating their time with Shin together. So they asked him to make a record with him. The resulting record, entitled You by Pearl Sisters, became a hit, bigger than anything Shin had hoped for. In fact, it seemed as though he almost had given up and stopped caring since he was going to move to Vietnam anyways. So this was really a surprise to him. So now let us listen to the song that launched the Pearl Sisters and in turn Shin into fame. The song, title song, You.
봄이 가고 푸른 잎에 낙엽이 지고 또 지고 온다 하던 그날은 수없이 지나가 버렸네. 젊은 날에 내 청춘도 지나가 버렸건만은 변함없는 내 사랑은 오늘도 기다려지네. 지난 날 그가 말했듯이 그날을 잊지 말아요. 그날을 기다려줘요. 너를 떠난 내일만 언제나 돌아오려나 나의 사랑.
You see the return of the strings, and it's quite beautiful actually. Quite nice sounding.
Yeah, quite a prominent acoustic guitar part, even though it's not playing much.
Yeah, the track is just built up from like just an acoustic guitar with vocals with an added layer of strings, and the band only kick in towards like the very end of the song. Very, very unique sounding, especially since like around this time, not even like folk music really. There wasn't a lot of folk music in Korea at the time.
Was guitar a prominent instrument in Korean music at the time?
The guitar, I guess so.
Yes.
It like just as much as everywhere else.
I mean, there were a lot of places where it wasn't that prominent. I mean, the US, it wasn't
I can't
that
really
prominent
think
until...
of an instrument that wouldn't be. I guess if you're doing like big band sort of music, it wasn't really needed. But most that I can think of, you know, he does use a guitar, at least a little bit.
Right.
It's very prominent in a lot of stuff, even though if it might not be, you know, the main focus in the song.
Right.
The album also started a trend of Shin reusing his old songs that never became a hit and seeing if it would stick with a different singer, and if it didn't, trying over and over again. Case in point, he re-recorded a song by the Ad 4 called You Are Burning My Heart, changed the title to A Cup of Coffee, and completely redid the arrangements. First I'll play the Ad 4 songs, and then I'll play the Pearl Sisters version.
커피 한 잔을 시켜놓고 그대 올 때를 기다려봐도 웬일인지 오지를 않네. 내 속을 태우는구려.
한 잔을 시켜놓고 그대 올 때를 기다려봐도 웬일인지 오지를 않네. 내 속을 태우는구려. 발버리지.
Yeah, slower tempo, turning the rather simple sort of R&B arranged song into this great psychedelic number with, I might even say soulful guitar licks, if that's even possible.
I mean, it had quite a cheap amp at the time, right? Because the buzzing sound was quite characteristic of, again, cheaper amps back then.
Pearl Sisters were such an overnight success that the record label quickly repressed the record with another album cover and like a different side two to just cash in and on their success. And in fact, the success of the record would convince Shin to stay in Korea and recruit more singers to sing his songs because he could see potential hits being made with his new and old songs. But let's pause that for a second. Let's get back to the Korean Beatles, the Key Boys. As I mentioned previously, most of the members left the group by 67 and one by one got slowly replaced. We call this the second generation of the Key Boys, and they released their first album in 1969. This is by far the most psychedelic Key Boys record in my opinion, and their heavy use of fuzz alongside the fact that they had original songs, some written by outside songwriters, rather than covering Western hits really helped this. In fact, let's hear a snippet of one of my favorite tracks on the record that has just been drenched in fuzz. A Love That's Far Away. Surprise! That track is a great track. I'm quite excited to hear what you think of it. That short snippet.
That's a good track. I mean, it's very characteristic of the psych of that time.
Yeah,
Psychedelic rock of that time.
very very much something that would be on like Pebbles, maybe, not like Nuggets or Pebbles compilations. It's a great track, great fuzz, awesome harmony vocals, and the whole album is just one of my favorites. It's a great album. Now, as I said, this album still has the keyboardist Ok Sung-bin from the original Korean Beatles, Key Boys. But he would leave too soon after this, and the Key Boys from that point onwards would be just a completely different band to their early 60s counterpart. That always seemed insane to me that a band could still have the same name, but it's essentially a completely different group. I know there's some examples of this in the West, and not much that I can think of. Imagine all the members in your band, including you, are just like completely different from the people who started it.
Like Fleetwood Mac.
Fleetwood Mac, yeah. I know Lynyrd Skynyrd has like a lot of the members replaced because, you know, they died. AC/DC only has one original member. I guess it feels more normal from the inside because you've been with those people for many, many years, even though you're not the original. But I don't know, from an outsider, like music listener perspective, it feels a bit weird.
Mm-hmm.
And there was actually quite a bit of sort of drama going on in between the original Key Boys members and this new second generation Key Boys. But we'll get to that in the second part of this podcast. Some old Key Boys members joined other groups, and that was the case for the lead guitarist of the Key Boys, Kim Hong-tak, when he was asked to join the supergroup He5. He5, I believe, was one of the first, if not the first, Korean supergroup consisting of members from Four Guys, the Jokers, the Silver Coins. Although none of these groups released any records during their time, they were seemingly pretty popular on stage. Their first release was with singer Yang Mi-ran, and much like the Key Boys album that we just talked about, the psychedelic record, showed off some great psychedelic musicianship. Here's a snippet of the title track, Sweet and Gentle.
행복하게 살며시 단둘이 정들면 어찌하면 좋을까요? 차라리 모른 채 할래요. 넓고 넓은 세상에서.
Again, very fuzz drenched.
Mm-hmm.
Now you could see
Right.
with the previously talked about Keyboys album and this He 5 album that the members of these Beatle-like beat groups were starting to experiment with psychedelia in their music to great effect, I must say. Back to Shin Jung-hyun. Now, with a hit album under his belt, he attempts to capture the glory again, once again, by recruiting new singers. One of these singers was by the name of Kim Chu-ja, a then unknown singer who would later be launched into fame thanks to Shin's songs. Here's one of her first hits on this album, Soldier Kim Back from Vietnam.
월남에서 돌아온 새카만 김상사 이제서 돌아왔네. 월남에서 돌아온 새카만 김상사 너무나 기다렸네. 굳게 닫힌 그 입술 무거운.
Although this song
Very
sounds
welcome, Surgery.
yeah, songs sound very much like a normal just pop song, pop hit at the time. The lyrical themes were very of its time, and it shows the state of Korea in the 1960s, late 1960s, where many people were sent to Vietnam to fight in the war. The drum sound intro invokes a military song, which further gives you this feeling of the state of the world at the time, and it turns into this it turns the song into this piece of Korean history.
I think that's cool.
Another track from the Kim Chu-ja album that I really enjoyed is not actually by Kim Chu-ja, but was sung by a singer called Kim Sun. His song "The Man Who Must Leave" is a great psychedelic track that I recommend to anyone trying to get into this type of music. Here's a snippet of this amazing track that I honestly just recommend you should just check out on your own, like the full song on your own. And that was just the intro. Isn't that great?
It's very well made. It's a very well made intro. It's very progressive. This is Xinjiang.
Yep, it is. I honestly really enjoyed the like almost haunting intro with those like frightening keys that almost sound like alarms or like some sort of, I don't know. It sounds stellar.
Like
The track.
deeper.
Another singer Shin picked up during this time was Kim Sang-hee. Kim Sang-hee actually had a career before this point, singing rather simple, typical trot numbers. So being chosen by Shin, she went through a transformation and became this psychedelic singer. Although this album is by Kim Sang-hee, the track I picked out to listen to, that was my favorite from this record, is an instrumental piece called White Room. It really shows off Shin's great guitar skills, and here's a snippet. You often hear discussions on Shin's songwriting, but I think his guitar skills get rarely talked about, and this track really shows off that great side of him. That was great. Good guitar performance skills. Obviously, he's a bit older now. He's very old now, so he can't perform nearly as good as that. But it's quite unfortunate that the only good footage of him playing guitar is from when he's very old. So a lot of people, Korean people, they're like, oh, his guitar playing isn't even that good, and they listen to like his
I think
live performances. Around this time, Shin Jin-hyun was also the music director for a film entitled Green Apple. This was one of my favorite Shin albums years ago when I was just getting into his music, and I know my past self would not let me not include this album here. That's a double negative. So here's a snippet of the title track.
뜨거운 햇살이 쏟아지는 이 땅 위에 새파란 능금이 오늘도 익어간다.
Very much a film soundtrack. Although it does show Shin's like versatility in his songwriting, and he doesn't just write psychedelic songs.
who arranged the horns in the song?
I believe it was Shin, yeah. And finally, to finish off this episode, I think it's only fair that we end off on a bang. So I'll talk about another He 5 album, and you are familiar with this. This time, it's a Christmas record, but don't let that fool you. Even though Christmas albums are mostly seen as a gimmick or a cash grab in the West, over here there are all sorts of crazy psychedelic Christmas albums, and this was one of the first. I've already shown Pharaoh this, so I'd like to hear more of your opinions on this. The standout track on this record is their cover of Jingle Bells, simply for the fact that it is 12 minutes long. How is a song like Jingle Bells 12 minutes long? Well, you'll see. Here's a snippet. Yep, it's Jingle Bells, and it transitions into a full cover of Iron Butterflies, Enagada da Vida. It sounds almost a bit haunting to hear the happy Jingle Bells suddenly turn into this minor key progressive rock song, but that might be just me.
I wouldn't call it haunting at all, no.
You
I
wouldn't?
think that is just no. I think that Inagata La Vida is in fact quite calm.
Is it? I that
But
like intro,
yeah,
that like minor chord intro, arpeggio intro, da 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 da. I always thought that was kind of like frightening almost.
I never thought that really, but I
Felt
never
kind of
thought of it as a Christmas song.
well, it is. It isn't. But imagine just like someone just buying a Christmas. It does say psychedelic sound on the cover, but like imagine someone buys in the '60s. Someone buys this Christmas album. It's like, oh, nice little instrumental Christmas record, good for the whole family. They put on side 2, and it's just normal Jingle Bells, and then it just goes into Enagada da Vida.
I feel like they'd find that quite gimmicky.
It could have been gimmicky at the time, actually. Yeah, that's true. But nowadays it's seen as this great experimental, like, who thinks to make Christmas music into psychedelic rock, you know?
Yeah, I mean, they weren't the first, but
They weren't the first,
they
but they were the
seem
first in
uh,
Korea.
yeah.
So today we covered the very start of rock and roll in Korea, with a few singers and Beatle-like groups releasing covers of Western hits, and we also delved into the start of the Korean psychedelic rock phase. But there are still more to come. Join us next time when we cover albums from 1970 to 1975, where even more psychedelia awaits us.
Goodbye.
Thanks for listening to our podcast. You can always contact us at koreanrockalbums@gmail.com. And check out our other YouTube channel, at Paperback Router Korea, where we post rips of a lot of the albums we just talked about.
창문 밖